Your gender in doing this prison story.
Ah.
How did that affect the dynamics?
I will say that the prison setting had more yin-yang, feminine and male energy than I would have expected. So it wasn't an all alpha male situation. There was a lot of spectrum of gender that presented at the prison setting. So as much as like going into it, I had thoughts of like, you know, whatever XYZ bad movie I'd seen about a prison. That wasn't the truth. You know, when you make a movie, you want to show up and own this space and say, this is how everything has to work, right? This is my crew, this is my schedule, this is what it has to be.
Because producers are...
Because producers time and money.
The synonym is bossy people.
I am so bossy. I am so bossy. And, you know, when it came to working in the prison, it was, I call it Taoist filmmaking. You know, you don't have control and you just give it all up. And you say thank you for whatever you're able to do.
She's a filmmaker who went into an Arizona prison to document the stories of Native Hawaiian men who were incarcerated thousands of miles from home. Ciara Lacy, next on Long Story Short.
One-on-one, engaging conversations with some of Hawaii's most intriguing people. Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox.
Aloha mai kākou. I'm Leslie Wilcox. Ciara Lacy is a Native Hawaiian producer and director of the documentary Out of State. The film follows two Native Hawaiian men from their confinement in a for-profit Arizona prison to their struggles reintegrating into society on Oʻahu. While still locked up in Arizona, the men began to reconnect with their native culture, even though they were isolated thousands of miles away.
I never knew 1 ounce of Hawaiian before I even came to jail. I learned everything in jail.
I always took from people. That's how I knew how to get what I wanted in life. Why couldn't I have learned my culture while I was outside?
Ciara's path to making this film was also filled with her own personal struggles. She spent her early years growing up in Central Oʻahu, where she loved to draw and write stories on her electric typewriter.
I was born early. So I was born like 6 weeks early, and my mom and dad didn't have a name. My mother studied opera at UH, and she was singing an aria at the time, and Kee-ah-rah was one of the words in the aria, and they needed to give the baby a name, and she pulled that out.
What does it mean?
It means it means light or clarity. So it's like kind of like chiaroscuro, like light and dark, the painting technique.
Well, that sounds like you're well named. What's your earliest memory? What was your home life like?
I had a great family. You know, my father worked at Pearl Harbor for like 35, 37 years. And, you know, I was lucky. I didn't realize it at the time. My mother was a housewife in the 80s and 90s. And it was the four of us, plus, you know, my mom, my dad, and my sister.
Did you have adversity along the way?
I mean, I was weird. I didn't necessarily fit in, but I was okay with that. When I was very young, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6, my dad went to a garage sale. My parents love garage sales. And he went to a garage sale and he bought an electric typewriter. And I fell in love with the thing immediately because I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And so I would sit there and I would just type at it. And I am sure some of my teachers in elementary school thought I was like, they must have thought my mom was typing my homework because I would turn in all my homework typed.
In elementary school?
Which is, I mean, like, but not because I liked to type. And I would write these I remember in 4th grade I wrote a really weird story about like a drug addict in Vegas. And I'm like, what 4th grader does that? And I'm sure my teacher thought this was weird. Like, but it made sense because that was the kind of thing I would do.
Future filmmaker Ciara Lacy went on to high school at the Kamehameha School's Kapalama campus. She applied herself and became valedictorian of her graduating class. That opened up many possibilities for her future, although she wasn't quite sure what that future was going to be.
When I was little, I knew we didn't have money for me to go to college, which is not uncommon, right? I mean, college is super expensive. So I needed to make sure I could go. And that was just always, you know, that was what drove it. So it's like, and I mean, whatever college is, you know, like, I didn't know. I just knew it was something that I needed to do.
And did you know what you wanted to do with this life-changing experience of college once you'd attained it?
No, and I think that was the problem. Like, I knew I needed to get there. And then when I showed up, I was like, well, now what?
And when you showed up at Yale. You got a very good,
I was very
you got
lucky.
Good scholarships and you got a top college.
Yes, I was very lucky.
Did you find it intimidating at all, this idea that everyone at Yale could be the smartest one in your class back home?
Oh my gosh, everyone at Yale is super smart. Are you kidding me? It's like 200% imposter syndrome. Like, okay, what am I doing here? And it takes a second. You realize everyone's thinking the same thing. And, you know, everyone's coming from vastly different spaces.
And what did you end up majoring in?
I ended up majoring in psychology, and I did crisis counseling in college. And that I really connected with. But I wasn't sure if that was going to be my career. And I thought that the counseling and the crisis counseling would be good for business. And that was about it. But I didn't think I wanted to go into therapy as my career.
But unlike many people, you didn't stay on the mainland. You came back. And then how was the job hunting when you came back?
Job hunting was hard. I had a really hard time getting a job. And I wanted to work in production. I had a secret love of music videos. I still have a love of music videos. And that's what I wanted to make. But I didn't have a degree in that, because who gets a film degree? It's way too lofty. And that's not a real job. These are things I'm telling myself, right?
A year after graduating from Yale University and returning home to Hawaii, Ciara Lacy decided to pursue her secret passion to produce music videos. So she packed up again and left for New York City to enter the world of video production.
And I went back and I showed up in New York and I had $2,000 in cash and a credit card. And I sold hot dogs at the Sheep's Meadow in Central Park. And I taught the SATs for Princeton Review. And I temped and I interned for free and I did whatever I could to kind of just figure my way.
So you're out there selling hot dogs and somehow you get hired in media production.
So I had no idea where to get started. And at the time, I was like, okay, I don't have any contacts, I don't know anybody, I'll just go on Craigslist. You know, you can get a couch and maybe I'll get a job. And so I was like putting my resume out there and sending it off into the ethers. And I sent off for a music video to work on a music video as a production assistant. And with no credits, no experience, whatever. And I got an email back from this guy. His name was Terry Leonard. And he said, meet me tomorrow at the McDonald's at Union Square.
And you didn't say, uh-oh, this guy could be a total crank or serial killer.
I was just like, well, it said the McDonald's at Union Square, so I'm not gonna die. And I said, okay. So I went and I met him and we talked and he said, okay, show up to work tomorrow. We're working on this music video. And I showed up the very next day. I had no idea what I was doing. And whatever he said, I was like, okay, I'm down. Like, he sent me to go pick up gear with a $5,000 deposit. I'd never held that much money before in my life. I had $5,000 on me. I just showed up in New York City. And I was like, well, you know what? Nobody's gonna rip you off.
And he trusted you with $5,000.
He trusted me with $5,000 because he was like, well, you went to Yale. You're not gonna steal my $5,000. So I guess that helped. And I was like, well, nobody's gonna steal it from me because nobody's gonna look at me thinking I have $5,000. I went and I did that, and then he sent me off to the mayor's office of film and television, and I went in and got their permits for the next day. Did I know how to get a permit for a shoot in New York? Absolutely not. And I think that sort of like, I don't know anything has been a big part of just like, how I've done my career. Like, I don't have to know everything. I just have to be able to ask somebody else who does and be okay with.
Yeah, as long as you're learning.
Yes, I ask the question, and I'm not afraid to ask the question.
Ciara Lacy spent about 10 years between New York and Los Angeles working in television production. She climbed the ranks, moving up from an intern to a producer. And she was finally able to work on music videos and rock documentaries for artists including the members of the Dave Matthews Band and Cyndi Lauper. However, in 2011, a medical condition sidelined Ciara.
Yeah, it was a mystery. Like, when I first started getting sick, I thought it was carpal tunnel. I had all these pain in my arms and in my hands, and it was absolutely frightening.
And then it turned out to be worse than carpal tunnel.
Yeah, and then I was like, okay, so then I was like, okay, this is carpal tunnel, I'll go get like acupuncture, and I'm starting to do yoga, and I'm doing all these things, and like, that wasn't actually what it was. And I couldn't lie down, and then I couldn't stand up, so then I was like constantly in pain. I was living in New York at the time. I couldn't carry my laundry to go do my laundry at the laundromat down the road. Like, I just couldn't do things. And I was young and super functional. You can't, like, oh, what are you doing? Like, this is not Ciara. Ciara can do stuff. It took a while for them to kind of figure out what was wrong. And I was diagnosed with this neuromuscular disease called thoracic outlet syndrome. And, you know, it's probably repetitive stress. It's bilateral. It's probably from all of this that I've been doing, and I've been doing a lot of it. And it was the world saying I needed to slow down. I moved back home, and I was 31, and I was told I might have to get a new career. And really affects your ability to think when you're in a lot of pain. It's just like super foggy, and like, you know, I was the kid that used to wake up before the alarm clock, right? And now I was just sleeping all the time because that was the only thing I could figure out outside of taking the medication to take the pain away. So this is like a very different person. And I gained a lot of weight, and you know, it was a pretty dark moment for me. But again, like, when I look back at it now, right? I don't begrudge any of it because it's what got me to the place where I think I really wanted to be. And it got me back home. I never left home thinking I didn't want to come back. I just didn't know how, right? And, you know, I found myself back at my parents' place, and, you know, I left very young, and I'd always been independent, and to have to return and not know what I was going to do about work and money, you know, I didn't want to be a burden. I'd never thought of myself as that before. And so it was a lot of like, okay, what can you do? And just rethinking a lot of things.
But you say this is all going to turn out for better. I know one thing that happened. That's when you came back here and you were ill, you met your husband, your future husband.
I did. I met Chris Kwok. And I really wasn't, so, like the night I met Chris, I hadn't gone out in a very long time. And I wasn't, you know, I went out with my very good friend Kristen, and she'd been kind. She'd taken me out for my birthday the night before, and she was like, will you come out with me the next night? And I was like, I don't, you know, I wasn't going out, and I didn't, my first response in my head was no, and I was like, that's not what you should say, you should go. And I went with her, and it was the end of the night, and we're about to go home because Kristen's teaching Sunday school the next day. And we bump into this party, and oh, it's my birthday, and I was like, no, it's my birthday, and then we have the same birthday, and it turns out I meet this guy's friend. And I had lost my grandfather. I had lost him the year before, and he always had these like incredible shiny eyes. And I met Chris, and I saw those eyes again. And I've been so, I'm sorry. I've been so sick for so long. And I was just so sad. And when I met him, I thought, you could be happy. And I'd forgotten. I'd forgotten. And like, I don't do good if I'm not happy. You know, I'm not like, it's just sort of how I am. And so it was so random in this moment where like, I shouldn't be here. And I don't want to be at a bar, and I'm super sick. And like, this guy I'm talking to, this like idea clicked in my head. And it's such a small thing. You could be happy? Like.
And it's nothing he said, it's just who he was.
I was like, this guy with the shiny eyes. And like, it was something I'd forgotten. And in the haze of everything, my friend turns to me, she goes, "We have to go." And I was like, "Okay, we'll go." And I'm not thinking straight. And we walk out the door, and I gave my number to his friend, and I said, "Tell Chris to call me." And we walked across the street for some reason, and I got a text message, and it said, "That's not your real name." And I was like, because whose name's Ciara, I guess. And I wrote back, I'm like, "That's my name." And he's, "Where are you?" And I turned my head, and he came running to where we were. And we ended up just hanging out with him and dropping him off at his house.
And you've said something about him that he taught you something you actually really didn't know, that there was more to life than work.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that. My whole identity was like my performance, right? My whole identity was, okay, what are the outcomes I provide, right? Like, how did I do in school? How am I doing at work? Those are the things that I knew I had control over, right? You don't have control over people. I have control over the things that I can do.
Achievement.
Yeah, totally. And, I never thought of my life as having somebody else in it. I never did. And I think that was just partially just because I was always off doing my own thing. I just never assumed anyone would be there to do that. And, and my identity was so wrapped up in my work. And that's why it was so crushing when I got sick, because it was like, if you take away my work, you've taken me away. What's left?
Oh, yeah.
And that's a very sad thing to think. It's a very sad thing to think. And yet at the time for me, it was true. And as I spent more time with Chris, he would say things that I think most people would be like, "That's terrible." He would say things like, "You're not that special." And when he says that, it wasn't that I'm not special. It's that your work doesn't prevent you from having the other obligations. The work doesn't come first, right? The work is part of it.
Ciara Lacy and Dr. Chris Kwok got married 2 years after they met. As Ciara was still adjusting to life with her medical condition in Honolulu, she found the inspiration to create her first original documentary film. She would pack her bags again, heading this time to a prison in Arizona.
So I was in physical therapy, and I had one of my mother's friends who's a physical therapist would throw out all these ideas. "Oh, you should do a film about this, or you should do a film about that."
I'm sure that happened to you all the time, right?
No, it didn't actually. It didn't. At first it caught me off guard, and then but in my mind I was in such a dark space where it was like, I can't do anything. Like, I can barely ride in a car at this point. One day when I was in physical therapy with my aunt, she was like, "There are these guys dancing hula in Arizona." And I took pause because I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Dancing hula at a prison in Arizona, why are they in Arizona? And like, how does that feel to you, Ciara, knowing they're dancing hula behind prison? Behind prison bars. And I packed it away in the back of my head, and I went off to go wallow in my own sadness. And 2 weeks later, I was at home on a Friday night, doing nothing because I was lame and sick, and I Googled what she had said, and I saw a video online, and I cried because I was seeing people who, in the moment that I saw, were so far from our community, and we're trying to find a point of reconnection. And we're coming back from what was probably, without having specific details, probably really tough stuff, man. I mean, probably some of the toughest stuff one could think of to come back from. And yet they were still trying. And I saw that and I was like, you have no excuse. You have absolutely no excuse.
You related to them.
Yeah. And in that moment, again, this crazy click in the head, I was like, maybe we can heal each other. And I didn't know what that really meant. But I tucked it away and I thought about it, and I saw my cousin Beau.
Beau Bassett, your co-producer or part of the producing team?
Yeah, my producer on Out of State. And at the time he was a public defender. And I mentioned to him this idea, and he was like, you know, this is a big issue for Hawaiians right now. And he's like, we should do this.
Filmmaker Ciara Lacy, along with her cousin Beau Bassett and her mentor Terry Leonard, set out to produce Out of State. The documentary is Ciara's directorial debut. It chronicles the lives of two Native Hawaiian men leaving the Arizona prison where they've been serving time and returning to Oʻahu to make a fresh start.
You know, the goal was to be as honest about what we were seeing. So I almost even intentionally didn't look up statistics and facts because I didn't want my mind as we were making the film to be clouded with, oh, this is how things are supposed to go because this is where the numbers are at. So let's just stay true to what actually happens, right? And as small and as like humble as we can appear is more important because the process was never about us, right? This film is not about me. This film is not about Beau. This film is about the men who are willing to share their lives, and hopefully we can do something positive with this.
And they were reconnecting with Hawaiian culture in an effort to be whole and to go back and make a life for themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, that effort I can get behind. If you're gonna try, if you're gonna try and nobody else is helping you, this is a very organic program that they have. This is something that the men develop themselves.
There's some many interesting themes in your film, and one of them, I think David Kahalivai, one of the prisoners, talked about how it's really hard to forgive yourself. It's hard to start on that journey where you can change. And then for the others too, how can somebody be ready for change when they have known nothing like what they really want to be?
Yep. No, and I think, you know, the first thing to that is what a humble and like vulnerable position for someone to put themselves in, right? For someone like David to be willing to recognize that and to share that with other people. You know, we were very fortunate because the men that participated in the film wanted to make sure our community understood what they were trying to do, right? Wanted them to understand how hard it could be and wanted to do this film to help each other. Like maybe if I tell my story or share my story, maybe if somebody knew how hard it was for me, that's gonna help one of the other brothers who are in prison to figure it out and do better.
You forgive yourself for a lot of stuff that you did, yeah. And I think I had to go to the ends of the earth and hit bottom to really find out who I was.
I've been locked up 15 years. I've been waiting all this time. I want to come home. But where is home?
I don't want to go back to jail because I have too much to lose.
We don't live in isolation. No man is an island, right? And so it's about knowing that it's all about interactions. Doing better for them is important for them to do the work and put it out there. But it's also going to be hard because the other people around them are going to have to do the work too. And as a Hawaiian, it's like we talk about hewa, right? We talk about hewa, what is wrongdoing, and that how does hewa work? It doesn't go in one direction. If I do something bad to you, I have to apologize, but I also need your forgiveness, and I also need you to be ready for that. The solution is both of us. So the solution isn't just me coming out trying to do better. The solution is I need your forgiveness.
That reminds me of what you said about your own life as a filmmaker, which was life tends to be incremental. You just one foot in front of the other.
I just show up, man.
And you keep going, and you hope to be in a forward step.
Yeah, you hope everything you do is a little bit better. Do you always get it right? No. But do you hope to put yourself out there and try? Yes. And for me, it's like, I make a million mistakes every day, like a lot. But I know that I at least putting myself out there and I show up. And if I do something wrong, I will apologize and we'll figure out a way to fix it. And I'm not afraid of that.
In 2017, the documentary Out of State was released and went on to win several awards on the film festival circuit, including Best Documentary at the Cayman International Film Festival and the San Diego Asian Film Festival. Ciara Lacy's health has improved, but her medical condition still requires management. She continues to produce and direct with a slate of new film and television projects. Mahalo to Ciara Lacy of Honolulu. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Long Story Short on PBS Hawaiʻi. I'm Leslie Wilcox. Aloha nui.
For audio and written transcripts of all episodes of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, visit pbshawaii.org. To download free podcasts of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, go to the Apple iTunes Store or visit pbshawaii.org.
Yeah, I think for me, the provocation is important. It's about instigating that ripple, right? I push the ripple and then we start asking more questions. It's not necessarily about always finding the solution, right? Maybe the questions help us get to the solution, but part of it is we need to start asking more questions.